Welcome, everyone, to another episode of One-on-One. I'm John Evans. Recently, I emceed an event called Pipeline to a Cure. It was to benefit the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. The CF Foundation is raising money for research, trying to find a cure for cystic fibrosis. CF is a progressive genetic disease that causes persistent lung infections and limits the ability of a patient to breathe over a long period of time. There is no cure. One of the speakers at the event of Pipeline to a Cure was a young lady named Alexis Smith. She was called a CF ambassador, a young lady living with cystic fibrosis. Her speech struck me in a way that not many others had in my time. I want to share some of her words with you now.
We take pills before every meal to digest our food properly and extra vitamins for the lack thereof. We take antibiotics for infections. We carry around inhalers because we never know when we might get short of breath. We wake up earlier than the average bear to do several inhaled nebulizer treatments, all while we wear an inflatable vest that shakes to loosen up the mucus in our airways. And we usually go to bed late because we can't miss our nighttime nebulizers and more airway clearance. On average, we take 20 to 30 pills a day and spend up to 4 hours doing our treatments. This is what it takes to live. Some of us will wear oxygen, some will carry insulin for the CF-related diabetes they now have. Some will be able to attend school. Some will do schoolwork from their hospital beds. Some of us will be healthy enough to start careers. And some will stay at home because just being is too exhausting.
Along with those words, Alexis Smith also told the audience she hasn't always been the best patient. I wanted to learn more about why. I wanted to learn more about Alexis Smith, about living with cystic fibrosis, and about her volunteer work as a CF ambassador. So I invited her to be this week's guest. Alexis Smith, CF ambassador.
Yeah.
Professional young lady. Welcome to One-on-One with John Evans.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I've done a lot of events in the 26 years I've been in Wilmington. I've talked to a lot of people who have different types of, whether it's diseases or conditions or thing like that. I must say, though, that when I was at the Pipeline event and I heard you talking about your journey with CF, I was hit in a way that I was never hit before.
Wow.
And I think it's because you got up there in front of all these people, and I know you do this through your website as well, but you got up and said, hey, look, I haven't always been the best patient here.
Yeah.
I haven't always done what I've needed to do.
Right.
And most people aren't ready to admit that. Why were you ready to admit it?
It's taken me a lot of time, and I think accepting no one's perfect. And with CF, there's so much that you have to do every single day. I mean, sometimes it's impossible for people to do all their treatments if you have a job or a family or even a social life. It's not everyone is the perfect patient, and I didn't realize that. But after speaking with other CF patients and doctors and nurses, I found out that I wasn't the only one that couldn't keep up with all my treatments, and life gets in the way, and we all deal with stuff. So it's just kind of managing. It's a big plate. But yeah, I haven't always been the perfect CF patient. I've skipped treatments, but you can't be hard on yourself either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How long did it take you to be able to get the guts to say that?
I really accepted everything when I was about 19. I was very secretive about my disease, and I don't know, it kind of hit me as an adult that I needed to be more active with my treatments, and that took me talking about everything and admitting or accepting that I wasn't perfect.
Mm-hmm. When do you remember? Now, you were born in Frederick, Maryland,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Diagnosed, from what I've been able to read, you were diagnosed with CF, cystic fibrosis, for those just coming into the conversation, at about 6 months old.
Yes.
Much too early for you to remember that day, obviously.
Yeah.
When do you remember the first earliest stages of having to deal with CF?
I've asked my parents actually if they remember me ever saying anything, or, if there was a moment that I kind of understood. I don't really remember figuring out that I was different until elementary school, when I would have to, before lunch, go to the nurse's office to take pills, and people would ask, why are you going to the nurse's office? But as a 7, 8-year-old, I was like, it's something I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I know when I was 2 or 3 years old, I was able to walk. I was in the hospital, and my mom tells this story that I wanted to go for a walk. So I made my nurse come in and take me for a walk, and I pushed my own little IV pole around. And yeah, I was like this tall. I was a little kid.
Yeah.
So,
Do you remember a time growing up when you realized that it was something that was going to keep you from being with friends or doing something that friends were doing or anything like that?
Yeah. About, I think I was 13. I remember I was in 8th grade, and I got MRSA. And I hadn't been hospitalized since I was a child, or a young child. So that was the first time I remember having to tell my friends that I was going to be in the hospital for a little bit. And when I came out, I was on IV antibiotics still, so I had to go to school with, a PICC line in my arm. And I remember I wore an ACE bandage over it, and everyone asked, what is that? And I remember telling people that I had ran into a tree.
Where did that come from?
I have no idea, no clue. But yeah, I didn't want people to know. All my close friends knew, and their families. But I was pretty secretive about everything. But yeah, I didn't get more comfortable until I was older, for sure.
And when were you comfortable with telling? I mean, you say your closest friends knew, your closest friends' parents knew. I imagine that's because if you ever stayed over and something happened, they would have to know.
Yeah.
But when did you again decide to say, okay, world, to heck with it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell the world that I've got it, and I'm gonna be out in front of it. It doesn't mean that you became a great patient, though.
Right.
I mean, some of this stuff still happened.
Definitely after high school. High school was still really hard, basically because people gossip more, and I'm trying to be active and fit in with all my friends and keep my social life. I was a cheerleader. I was very active in high school, and I was kind of embarrassed of it. But it took, about 18, I was kind of like, no one cares anymore. No one is going to treat me differently. I'm not going to be treated like the sick girl. And that's still, sometimes I still struggle with that.
Even
with
today?
Meeting new people. Yeah. Because I never know what someone is going to think. A lot of people don't know what CF is, or they only know things that they've Googled, which don't Google it.
Right. Ask somebody, right.
Yeah, you only see basically the worst of the worst. And I have to tell people every patient is different. There's a huge spectrum of CF, and I'm not in the hospital all the time, or I'm able to live a life that I want to because I'm healthier. So, a lot of people have this notion that, every CF patient is very sick and sickly and, not able to do certain things. And I've always I've pushed myself, and I am able to do a lot.
When did you decide you were going to be a CF ambassador? Because, I mean, for those who don't know, you are basically a spokesperson. You are out there, and you're not afraid, and you're out there advocating. It's not a paid position.
No.
It's one that you do volunteer-wise.
Right.
It's one that you want to get out there and basically educate and advocate and some of that. When did you decide, okay, I want to be a grown-up, I want to be an ambassador here?
Well, I started doing the Great Strides walks in Wilmington, and I was a team leader. So that started when I was about 22, and I started with like a 5-person team, and it grew every year. And then when I started my website, I wanted women with it specifically to feel beautiful, because I've struggled with that as well, and I have a port, so that was difficult to deal with. But not everyone, I don't know how to
I want this to be educational for
Right.
people.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're able to say some of these things to people who may not be able to be dealing with it as strongly as you are, I think is a good thing. So don't hesitate to want to talk about
Yeah.
this. I've got as much time as possible here.
Well, I'm just very open with the disease. I'm open about every aspect of my life. So talking about it for me is therapeutic. And others might not, or they might be hesitant to do so because they are still scared or struggling with that fear. And I just want to clear the platform and make it okay. I think a lot more needs to be talked about than it is, for sure, especially illnesses.
In what way?
I think we need to bring awareness to any sort of illness, because people struggle behind closed doors, and it shouldn't be like that. So
When you were born, life expectancy for a child diagnosed with cystic fibrosis was 18.
yes,
You're about to be 28.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you're going to worry
I think
if
it's in 5 days now.
Yeah, okay. Well, happy birthday then, as we tape this today. What was it like for your parents and then your stepdad to think maybe, okay, we've only got her
Yeah.
for this period of time? Is that how they treated it?
So it is a genetic disease. Both parents have to be carriers. So my mom didn't really know, didn't have any family history of CF. She doesn't know. But my father had 2 cousins with CF who had passed away. But this was in the 70s, I believe. So my dad's side kind of knew a little bit more about CF, so they were scared right away because they had seen their family members pass away, and they were very sick, but it was also in the 70s. So my family was very scared, but like I said, during my speech, my mom went to respiratory therapy school because she wanted to know how to keep me the healthiest possible. And she did a great job. And I think her efforts, and I've got some great guardian angels, and I have a very strong faith. I think that's what has kept me healthy and strong.
But how did they deal with that, though? I mean, because
I don't know.
it doesn't. I mean, I'm just wondering if you ever
Yeah.
talked to them about it, because I mean, you know, if you say the average life expectancy is 18, and I've got a child just diagnosed, I think, wow.
Yeah.
The first thing I have is I only have 18 years with this child.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there have been breakthroughs and treatments that have
Right.
extended the life expectancy now, but I imagine. Have you ever talked to your mom or dad about the blow,
have a little bit.
the punch in the gut that they got when they got that diagnosis?
Yeah. And now that I'm older and I have friends with children, I think about that more, about what it would be like to be a parent with a child with CF or any sort of illness. And I don't know how they did it. I mean, my mom is very strong, and I think how energetic I was as a child kind of gave them more faith and more hope that I'd be healthier and maybe make it past this life expectancy. And they knew the entire time that there were so many treatments that were just being discovered. And so the gene was discovered in 1989, and I was born in 1990. So I mean, they knew that researchers and doctors were full throttle with finding a cure. So,
why did your family move to Wilmington?
So my mom always knew that being by the saltwater would help me.
Yeah, it does.
And she always wanted to live by the beach. I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah.
So my mom, myself, and my stepfather moved to Wilmington when I was 13. And I fell in love. I wanted to move too, even though I missed all my friends and everything. I was ready to do it, and I'm glad they did. I think it definitely has helped because I go to the beach all the time during the summer, and it played a part in keeping my lungs clear because the salt water really, it thins out your mucus. It makes you easier to cough, and when I was swimming in the ocean a lot, I could tell
and
it worked.
And I mean, and this is no knock on Frederick, Maryland, where you grew up. I've been through Frederick, Maryland for years, going back to my home state of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. If I put Frederick, Maryland up against Wilmington, Wilmington's going to win in many, many categories here.
I mean, I'm not hating on my hometown.
That's what I'm saying.
But yeah, it's quite different. I mean, you've got the mountains, and I mean, I was active there, but the air is very thick and different. So even when I go home now to visit or my family up there, I get a cold or something because the air is so different. Mm-hmm. So
as an ambassador, what else do you try to do to be somebody who is advocating for other children who may be scared, who may not have the courage that you have now as a 27, soon to be 28-year-old, willing to stand up? They may be 12, 13 and not know. And also for parents. Yeah. There's got to be a lot of parents out there who are scared, who maybe don't want other parents to know their child has CF. What responsibility do you take with that role?
Especially at Pipeline, I met so many new parents, and they just wanted to talk to me, and I wanted to be as open with them as possible, and I had my support system there with me, and I just wanted to be open and share my story because that's how parents get through. They saw me and they're like, oh, she's healthy. It gives them hope. And kids in high school, like, I know what they're going through if they felt the same way as me. And some kids feel hopeless. And some, they don't push themselves because they're like, oh, the statistic says I'm only going to live this long. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to, see those numbers and get scared because there's so much happening, and I am very confident that we'll see a cure very soon. So yeah, it's just kind of the fear factor. It's being okay with yourself and your disease and not being afraid of what could happen. I think that's what keeps you strong.
Have you had a big aha moment during this whole ambassador thing? I imagine you said you talk to parents and you help parents. Has there been a moment since you took on this ambassador role and this volunteer role? Do any of the stories stand out that you were able to help somebody and they wrote back, or you talked to somebody and you got the biggest hug in the world you ever got in your life? What are some of those moments like, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah. So I think the first one was years ago. I was 14. I was at a benefit for CF, and I went to the restroom, and there was this woman who had heard my story, and she just started talking to me. It was a very awkward moment.
In a restroom, I imagine it might be,
But she had heard about my story, and she talked a little bit more to me, and she looked at me, and she was just like, "You are an angel sent from heaven," and that. I started crying immediately because that was just so special to hear, and that gave me hope and faith that other people, there were other people that understood the disease, and that was a lot. It made me feel really good about myself and that I could make an impact. So, I mean, even though I was really young and it didn't affect my years as a high school student, but
you probably value it now more than you did then.
Yeah, for sure. And even at the Pipeline to a Cure, there were so many times where I was just like, gosh, I feel so much for these people and these parents and these family members of people with CF, and Yeah, it was all just overwhelming, and it made me a lot more motivated. I mean, I'm happy to be here and share my story even more because it does have a positive effect and a ripple.
How about on other patients who are children? How about the children that you talk to?
One of my best friends has a niece with CF in Wilmington, and every time I see her at Great Strides every year, and I just want to hug her. Like, I see her and I want to cry because she's, I believe, 8 or 9 years old, and she's so spunky, and it just makes me so happy to see her, and she's not afraid. And I think it's beautiful to see, because to me, that's awesome that kids do it anyway. They do their life anyway, and it doesn't faze them. Their daily struggles do not faze them. It's really beautiful to see.
What have you learned through the whole Be a Maven website? That's your website,
Yes.
beamaven.org. I've looked at it. I've read a lot of the things on it. But why did you start it, and what have you learned through it?
I started it, so the website has a lot to do with CF, and it also, I share my stories with mental illness, and doctors are not just now, but a lot of the focus, a lot of attention has been brought to mental illness and CF because it is stressful, and it can be very challenging some days, and that fear, I mean, even you can be the strongest person with it, and you still are afraid of, getting sick. Anything can happen at any moment. So it's challenging, and that fear hangs over your head every day. I'm death positive because I've thought about death every single day, and I'm not afraid of it. Yeah. I know, like, there's days where I forget I have CF, but I know in the back of my head that anything could happen. And I'm very confident, but, it's something that I have struggled with, but now it's not a negative thing. And so I wanted to share my story more with struggling with the mental illness part of CF, and sharing my journey, because I know that other CFers might get inspired, or parents might get inspired, or just being open about everything makes other people a little bit more comfortable.
Repair, strengthen, empower, inspire.
Yes.
Those are the four kind of mantras, I guess, if you look at it. Where did that all come from? Where did you get all those things from?
So, the website is geared towards young women, but repair, a lot of people feel broken, or that they're not good enough, or that they have to keep everything secretive. So it's all about repairing and building yourself back up, and building your self-esteem, and not being afraid, and just feeling beautiful inside and out, and you can impact someone else's life by just being, and being strong, and being yourself, and getting through a lot of those challenges. So.
Do people reach out to you through the website?
Not as much as I'd like.
Well, we'll fix that.
Yeah. I'm all about people sharing their story too. It can be anonymous. You can put your name on there. It's up to you. But I think the more stories that I get, the better it will be, obviously, because I don't want my story to be the only one on there. It's good to see all aspects of life and hear everyone's story. Yeah.
As I was cutting the grass today, my mind wanders when I cut the grass. Sometimes I look down and some of the lines are not as straight because I've been thinking about something. But I had a couple of questions that popped into my mind that as a parent, I want to ask.
Okay.
If they're too difficult and you don't want to talk about them, tell me.
Okay.
Explain what the feeling is like when CF is at its worst.
So I'd be in the hospital, and no one likes to be in the hospital. So that's a defeat in itself. It can be painful. it's painful because of the treatments that you're getting. It's painful to know that you're stuck in the hospital. And it's very frightening, but my worst is not as worse as a lot of other patients with CF. So on that level, I don't really know what it's like. But yeah, it gets hard, really hard.
It sounds like it's as difficult mentally as it is physically.
Oh yeah.
At least
and
in your
it
case.
Adds to it. You know, your mental state really adds to your physical health, and it all, you know, goes together, and it's like a snowball effect.
And that's why the website is so important to you, to tell these stories of and empower young ladies, especially.
Yeah, it inspires myself because I want to keep writing, and I just there's so much that I still haven't written about that I want to.
Ever feel like giving up?
There have been times, yes. And I don't feel bad about admitting that, especially with the mental illness part. Yeah, there have definitely been times.
What made you not?
My family and my friends, myself, because I've always known that I'm meant to do something here on earth. I think everyone is. And I haven't done as much as I want to yet. So that has kept me going. And yeah, I know that everyone is special. Everyone has their reason for being, and I'm not done yet. So
I love that. I think that's awesome. I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
That's a great attitude to have.
Yeah.
Toughest day or days?
There's a lot of days when it's just hard to get out of bed, when your body aches. If I have a day where I'm coughing a lot, the next day my chest is sore, my throat is sore, your back is sore. There's so many things that go into like a violent cough. It hurts. Or days that you're just feeling nauseous, or you just feel defeated, or you're doing your treatments and they're very tiring too. I always get really sleepy after my treatments because you're coughing and it's just taking a lot out of you. And then if you work or if you go to school, that also adds to just being tired. And it can be painful.
Fill in the blank. I don't like it when blank.
Ooh, about my okay. I don't
anything
like
related to your journey, your daily life, your history, anything. I don't like it when blank.
People assume, like I said about Googling the disease, they assume that I deal with things that I don't, or that I have. There's more challenges than what meets the eye, because CF can sometimes be an invisible illness. So I go out and people don't know I have CF, or they see my port and they're like, what is that? You know, a lot of people say really dumb things sometimes.
Like what? Share.
So I once got asked if my port was a cyst, and you know, you don't ask that.
Right.
you know?
that would be.
Or you don't assume. There's a lot of really rude questions that I've been asked, but I've I've learned to just be nice, and instead of getting angry, just educate. So yeah.
Okay. Other side. I love it. I love it when blank.
Strangers. Okay, so I've met people and friends before that I'll tell them about my disease. They have no idea, and they do the research. They they learn about it and they're like, by the way, I really read up on CF and what you go through. And that's really special because people are taking the time out to figure out someone's life. And I love that.
Do you have conversations maybe with young adults, men, women, who have cancer, who have diabetes, who have other conditions and or diseases?
Yeah.
What are those conversations like?
Yeah.
If you don't mind sharing, I don't want to get too personal
it's fine.
here.
They're very interesting because I don't know everyone else's story. I don't know everyone else's illness and what they struggle with. But we're all kind of in the same boat. So it is interesting to see other people's attitudes and how they deal with their disease. And I think a lot of people that I've come into contact with are just fearless. And it's so cool because in a crowd of people, you don't necessarily maybe see the disease, and they are just rock stars, and they just do their life and live their life, and they're really the special people, you know.
Have you learned anything from any of them specifically?
Goodness. I guess not specifically, but
just maybe carrying your head higher and not being afraid?
Yeah. I get inspired by others' journeys and others' illnesses and what they have to go through. So
who do you admire?
I admire my parents and my stepfather. My stepfather has been a really, really strong and supportive person in my life. And him and my mother are no longer together, but he has stayed very close with me. And he's spent holidays in the hospital with me because I've spent a lot of Thanksgivings in the hospital. And he's been there for every hospitalization. So I admire him a lot.
We, at the Pipeline to a Cure event, I don't know exactly what the total was that we raised. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of $130,000 or $40,000 that night. As you're sitting in an event like that, I'm coming at it from a different way. I'm coming at it as the guy with the big mouth, kind of trying to herd cats and getting everybody's attention.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what we're doing next. Here's what we're auctioning off next. Ben's job that night was to get people excited about that.
Yeah.
But you're in the audience at an event like that, and whether it's this or somebody with diabetes at JDRF or somebody with cancer at an ACS event, what is it like for someone with, in this case, CF at Pipeline, when these people are bidding and these people have bought tickets and these people are there trying to raise money for you? And to try to make you feel better. What is that like? I attack it from a different way. How do you?
It was so exciting and so awesome to see how many people support the disease and want to help. And after I spoke and you were doing the bidding, that I wanted to cry. That was so overwhelming to see people excited to donate, and they were so inspired. And a lot of the audience, like I said, were parents and family members, and you just see there's so much hope in that room, and so many people there's so many emotions circulating. But yeah, I was just like sitting back in my seat, just in awe.
It has to be. I mean, it's cool for me when we get done with one of those events and it's successful, and you kind of walk out. And I've said this before with other things on this podcast, and when you do things like that, you kind of stand up a little straighter.
Yeah.
You're kind of walking maybe a couple of inches off the ground because of something you did that night is going to help somebody.
Right.
But from a perspective of somebody who is there as a patient, as somebody with the disease in that instance, I've always wondered what it was like on the other side.
Yeah, and it's awesome to know that all of that, like the CF Foundation is incredible. So all of that money raised, it's going directly to research. And so, $130,000, that was just like, oh my gosh, so many clinical trials can happen after that. Like it's so amazing.
Mm-hmm. It's a great example for a 7, an 8, a 9, a 10-year-old to look at somebody who's, wow, she's 28. Wow, is she old? But somebody who's 8 or 9 years old looks at, well, they look at me like I'm ancient, but they look at maybe somebody like you as like, wow. Look at her.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great example. Maybe you're doing it for one reason, but maybe it's in the back of their mind, it can be something different.
Yeah, I think it's awesome if kids look up to me, and that's great. I hope they do, because one of my tattoos is actually dedicated to having CF, and it took me a lot to accept the disease, and once I did, I got the tattoo, and people ask me if I'll ever regret them, and I don't already, so I don't think I ever will. But yeah, it's really special when other kids see that, and I'm just living my life.
But you're a leader. You're out front, and I'm thinking that in so many instances, it's been so good that you decided to be this ambassador and be this leader, not just a team leader on the Great Strides Walk, but a leader in other ways.
I'm not to be conceited, but I'm a very strong person, and I think everyone with any illness, you have to be strong. You can't let it defeat you or define you, so you learn how to live with courage. And so I want to get that across. I want people to know, like, this is what I deal with, and I'm a stronger person, and I walk with my head high, and I know that about myself.
What haven't I asked you today? Because I think, and I must salute you, because I've asked questions that I wasn't sure you were going to be okay answering.
Yeah.
But what haven't I asked you that you want people who aren't around CF, who may not know much about it, who may not have a family member with it or have ever dealt with it? What do you want to know that maybe we haven't talked about here today?
Like I've said before, the spectrum is so wide. So I would love if people could just to be aware about other people. I think that's what really does it. It's with any disease. You want to be aware of what other people are going through, and be in tune with it and learn the most that you can. If I don't know about someone or know about something that someone is going through or any sort of medical issue, I do my research, and I want to know about people, and it's just about caring. So I think that's really special when other people do that, and it's just about like being a good person.
Well, you're a true leader, CF ambassador, but I think you're a great example, not only for young patients with CF, but just the community and how you've been able to really embrace it. And you had tough times. Again, admitting that you weren't the best patient in the world took a lot to do. But you've come on the other side of that now, and I think you've embraced this role, spectacularly, really.
Yeah. Also, it takes a sense of humor to deal with everything, because you can't, like, if you don't have something to laugh at, or you're not gonna be as strong, or you're not gonna be able to handle the really sad days. You just have to stay positive and try and laugh every day. So yeah, that's another thing. I think I have a good sense of humor, so I'm able to deal more.
Yeah. Well, Alexis, I appreciate you taking some time, and again, all the respect in the world, and
Thank you.
and we really wish you the best. And one of these days, we're going to be able to open up one of our newscasts and say that there's a cure for CF and many of these other diseases we deal with.
Yeah. It's going to be very overwhelming, because if there is a cure one day, then you have the thoughts of, who am I without this disease? So, but I'm excited to get there. Yeah, that's
Alexis,
not a challenge.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in today, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much.
A big thank you to Alexis Smith for coming in and sharing her story about being a CF ambassador, but more importantly, what it's like to live with cystic fibrosis. You heard it's not always easy for a young child or a teenager or even a young adult to talk about living with this disease. I hope we educated people a little bit more about what it's like and how difficult it is, not just for the patients, but also for families. The median projected survival rate now for someone with CF is almost 40 years old. That's a lot longer than it was in 1990 when Alexis was born. If you'd like to get involved with the CF Foundation, log on to cff.org. I'd like to ask you a favor. Please subscribe to, rate, and review my podcast. If you do, that'll help us bring in even more listeners in the future. I'm John Evans. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of One on One.